2nd, 2022. And everybody's had fun with the date today, I'm sure. So the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes for the January 25th, 2022 meeting. So any conversation or discussion about those minutes? All right, if none, do we have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Move for approval by Alderman Pinchot. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second by Ms. Moore. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries. Why don't we move on down to the landscape plans, because I'm sure that's why you're here. Sure. So it probably won't take long to get there anyway, but let's move on down to Renaissance of Farragut, 12756 Kingston Pike. And with that, Bart, if you'll let us know what you got.
Okay, this is a small landscaping plan for an addition they're doing at the Renaissance of Farragut. They're adding 2 buildings at the western end of the development. And so they, I believe that y'all went to site plan approval with the Planning Commission on last Thursday. So they have the landscaping plan here for y'all to review tonight. The applicants had made all of the adjustments and corrections that staff had asked them to, so staff can recommend approval of the plan. So, I believe the one I sent out in the packet was the corrected one. So, and there's someone here from the development if you have any questions for them on what they're doing or what the plan entails.
Okay. Is there anything you want to share with us on what you're doing, Noah?
No, my name's Noah Myers, 503 Concord Road. I'm happy to answer any questions as they arise.
Okay.
I'm just curious, how do we know we have the corrected plan? What's on here to determine if this was the original? Or
I got the corrected one in at the before I put the packets out, so I put the corrected one.
You're pretty certain this is it?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted, it seemed a little questionable there, but.
Yeah, I'm like 99.9% sure that I got it in the packet. But certainly the one we'll stamp up for approval will be the corrected one.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Can you pull it up on the screens?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There you go. They're adding the 2 buildings there. They've got landscaping for the area around the building also for the minimum number of shade trees that are required based on the the parking lot areas and the building area. All the parking spaces are within the minimum distance from a qualifying shade tree. So the plan is compliant with all the regulations that are applicable to it.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I do. I have a question. I know exactly where in the complex are these buildings. I know they must be on the upper side.
It is. This is on the far western end of Renaissance. So these were a couple of sites that we prepared almost 15 years ago. And we had originally designed these sites for 2-story buildings that would pretty much mirror image the other buildings other than the big Southeast Bank building, but that would mirror image the other buildings. And the market's changed a little bit. And so we really don't have the demand for the 2-story buildings like we used to. And so these are actually 1-story buildings. So this plan actually increases the pervious area, the landscaped area, quite a bit over what we had originally proposed 15 years ago. Matter of fact, the overflow parking's on the back side of the buildings, which is the south side or the bottom of your screen there. And so anyway, it's a slightly different plan, but the building footprints are in the exact same location as what we brought before you guys many years ago.
So the top part of this drawing is facing Kingston Pike.
That's correct. Yeah, the top part that's north, and so that's facing Kingston Pike. But these, quite frankly, these buildings are up at the very top of the hill. Most people didn't even realize that these building pads were even there. It was a phase of renaissance that we thought we would get to a little bit quicker, and for a variety of reasons, we didn't get to it. And so here we are now with a slightly revised plan that that we think actually is an improvement. Not only is it less impervious surface, but they're actually lower buildings. They're one-story buildings, so they're not quite as tall. They're still all brick, and but they're a little bit different product than what we had originally anticipated. Where they're still business offices. They're not the traditional offices that we had before. These buildings allow for a little bit more flexibility, where you could have the big differences are shipping and receiving rooms that we have on these buildings that allows folks to basically accommodate exactly that shipping and receiving that we didn't really even think about with all the web-based sales that go on nowadays that didn't necessarily go on 15 years ago. So it's a little bit different product, but it's very, very compatible and consistent with what we have at Renaissance.
Trying to visualize it, I guess if it's up on top of that hill and it's one story behind some two-story buildings, is it going to be very visible at all from the road?
Quite frankly, no. I would be surprised, even when the foliage is off the trees in the winter, I'd be surprised if you would ever see these buildings from any adjacent right-of-ways or even adjacent properties.
Are they leased? Do you
No.
have occupants? for
No,
them?
actually, we're going to move our company into half of one of those buildings, and you see a little line down the middle of those buildings. So those buildings, they're 6,900 square foot buildings, and they're designed for 2 tenants, of which my company is actually going to take half of one of those buildings. I do think we'll lease them pretty fast, though.
I have no further questions.
Any other questions or comments? Landscaping plan appeared very well done from what I looked at, so. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, do we have a motion from the board?
I move that we approve.
I'll second.
A motion approved by Mr. Armstrong, a second by Ms. Stowe. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Appreciate you bumping me to the top of the agenda.
You're welcome.
I get to go home now.
Take care.
Yeah, back out in
Stay
the rain.
dry.
All right, so we'll move back up to the ground-mounted sign applications. The first one is for Maurice's at 11443 Parkside Drive.
Okay, this is a simple tenant panel installation out on, in the Turkey Creek development area. I think you're all familiar with the area. It's just, both sides of that sign. It's clearly visible. It's a good-looking thing. They had originally had it in with a different color. It was kind of light, and it didn't match the other ones there, so they revised it to black lettering. I think it's a much better look, and it's going to be a lot more visible from the road. So staff can recommend approval of it.
Yeah, it looks very legible to me. So any questions or comments for staff?
Were they in another area before, or is that the first time they've been there?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
They were next to Bed Bath & Beyond before.
Okay, I thought that.
I didn't hear what you just said, Brandon. What?
They were next to Bed Bath & Beyond
Oh.
in that shopping center.
It's a woman's store.
Any other questions or comments?
Looks good.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a
motion to approve it as is.
Motion approved by Ms. Stowe
I'll second.
and second by Ms. Moore. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The next ground-mounted sign application for Allstate at 11416 Kingston Pike.
Okay. This is another tenant panel installation. Again, I think you're all familiar with the area that it's going in. I put in my write-up that they should at least think about increasing the font size on the lettering. I think it would be a little more effective. I got some input back from the sign company this afternoon via email. They felt that to do that, they'd either have to increase the size of the logo, and they don't really have room for that, or it wouldn't be in proportion with what their sign normally is and what they wanted. So I mean, I think it's visible the way it is. It's sort of, along the same lines as the barber shop above it. So, or at least on the one side of the sign. So I think it's approvable the way it is. I think they're wasting some space on the sign, but it's probably visible. And would be legible as much as anything else on the sign is.
Well, they have a wall sign too, right?
They do.
I mean, that particular sign to me is always hard to read anyway.
Yeah,
don't
it's not
think
well located on the site. So.
No, it's tough, and I don't think changing the font size is going to really change the readability of that panel, personally. So,
I agree with Marty, but honestly, it took me a few minutes just to find it on the printout there. I mean, I couldn't really find it.
it's a tough sign.
Yeah.
It really is.
Now, there's 12 tenant signs there. That's pretty rough in that small of an area.
Well, and there's nothing of color or anything. At least the barber sign has the little barber flag on it. So, it really doesn't stand out. But if they're happy with it, it's fine.
It's a tough location, and you've got the landscaping that does approach covering, pieces
One
of
side,
it,
yeah.
depending on, so it's tough. So,
Yeah, I was thinking, they could push the logo all the way down to the end and bump the font a little bit, but they just didn't seem to want to do that. And, absent it just not being legible, that's really up to them. If there was a true legibility issue and readability issue, I would say, to require it to be increased, but it's probably not the case.
Well, Allstate's part of their logo, the size
Yeah.
relationship to the icon, so they're not going to.
Yeah,
No, I will tell you what they did, someone did, is they messed with the logo just a little bit when they put it on the sign layout. See, it's not the same ratio as the logo above it.
oh, okay.
So it's a little misleading,
Oh,
just so you know. So I think it's good as is. That's what
so
I'm
when they
saying.
photoshopped it in, it's a
Yeah,
little
they
compressed.
stretched the logo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
any other comments or questions? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Ms. Moore. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Stowe. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the last thing would be under other business. It's a follow-up discussion that we had at the previous meeting about sign ordinance provisions for peripheral accessory freestanding signs and requests for directional enter-exit signs. So with that, there's amendment language for us to discuss, and I guess I'll turn it over to you to talk more about that, Mark.
Yeah, for the board members that were here last meeting, we at least started a discussion about the whole issue we've had. It's not really a big issue, but we've had a couple of locations put in enter-exit signs at their driveways. The current ordinance language is there at the top of the handout and here on the screen as well, that, we really only allow one, and the way it was written, it was one per street. And I think the intention there when Mark, did this was really one per driveway, but even at that, it doesn't provide for, enter or exit. It wouldn't provide for, if you had a one-way in, one-way out. And so, before we took enforcement action against a couple places, we thought we should, bring it to y'all and see whether or not you wanted to make a recommendation on at some point to make an amendment. That's an ordinance, so it would have to eventually make its way to the planning commission and then the board of mayor and aldermen to amend the ordinance. But regardless, we talked about it briefly last meeting, and y'all wanted me to put together some sample language as to, how we might make that amendment. So that's what I did. I thought, I started to think about some of the other issues that were, brought out about very wide cuts or median cuts, but it got fairly complicated to try to come up with all that. So I sort of simplified it and just said, there's really two possible ways of dealing with it. One is one per driveway. So if you had a one way in, one way out, it'd be one at each, but if you only had a single driveway, you would just get one accessory sign. There's pros and cons to doing that. Obviously, it limits the amount of small signs that could be along the road. The downside is depending on, which way you're coming from, you might not be able to see it. If it is a one way in and one way out, that could become confusing if you only had it on one side. The other alternative is to just let them put a sign up on either side of the driveway cut or the driveway access point onto a piece of property. And that's the second set of language there. By and large, they're the same, except for, the bottom sentence I have on the first page there, where, just make it clear that if there is a driveway that's divided by a median, we're counting the entire driveway and not each side, so you don't get 4 at that location. You would just get 1 and 1. The other thing we did is, because if we're not going to tie it to the street, you don't want too many signs that might be located away from the driveway cut. So even though these are kind of intended to be enter exit, they don't have to be. So you can put anything you want on the sign. You can put a logo on it. You can, whatever message you want on it. So rather than let them be, 2 strung up the street somewhere, or even one of them, tie it to the driveway. So I added that stipulation to the language that, in addition to the setbacks, that it can't be more than 10 feet from the curb of the access way going in, and that way you don't get one half a block down from the driveway leading into the property. So that's 2 ways of going about it. I don't know how you all feel about whether you think it's reasonable to have 1 or 2 at each driveway cut. There's only 3 places in town right now that we could actually think of that have them. One is McDonald's. Second one is the new U-Bank that's up here off Campbell Station Road there, where you permitted their ground sign back a number of months ago. They have a one-way in, one-way out, so they have a enter on one drive and exit on the other drive. It's just, even there, they were technically in violation of the ordinance now because they could only have one anywhere along that street. And then down at the Horizon Bank, formerly First Tennessee, down Kingston Pike, they have 2 at each cut. They have 1 on Kingston Pike and then on the side street over there. And they had been permitted to do that years ago. When they switched, we let them flop out the name of the bank. They just put a new face on the existing posts that they had there. So those are really the only places we could think of in town that really have those signs right now. So it's not that big of a problem, except we've just had a couple people put them in either without permits or, the one was permitted in years past to have them. So, the McDonald's has one on each side of their cut, but only on one of their driveways, not around the side, just at the front there. And then the Horizon Bank has 2 at each driveway, and the U-Bank just has 1 at each driveway. So just, try to get some input as to whether you want to potentially move forward with recommending this type of change to the board. Ultimately, I think, what I would do is I would bring back some language, and if we're going to make some changes, there's some areas in the ordinance that probably could use some clarification that we've identified working with it now for about a year. So if we're going to run some amendments through, we'll probably, put them all through. So at, either next meeting or the meeting after, I would just bring back a slate, an ordinance that has a number of changes, but, most of them would just be clarifications. This was, more of a change that we wanted to get input on beforehand. The only other thing I thought about that I wanted to at least bring up to you and get your input on it is, the additional item for discussion there as to whether or not you wanted to put some additional aesthetic control on the poles or structures holding up the signs themselves, you know. The Eubank and the McDonald's are just on a matte black finish type pole. If you go down, if you have some time to look at the Horizon Bank, you know, I think they're all blue. So you could see, you know, the sort of visual impact of having a lot of color out there on the street. So you could allow those signs and just allow all the mounting hardware to be, say, like a flat black. That would kind of maybe limit the visual impact up and down the streets. I don't know whether that makes a difference or not. But, you know, as it is now, the language requires the base to be architecturally compatible. But if you had a building that, you know, had a lot of color on it, you know, you could have a base that did as well. So it's, I just want to at least throw that out as if any members were particularly concerned about the aesthetic impact of having, you know, some additional signs like this pop up at both cuts, you know, both sides of a driveway entrance, you know, and if a bank's logo's colors or a business's logo colors were bright red or, you know, bright blue or something, would you want the pole, which isn't very high, you know, we're only talking about 30 inches total height anyway, but, you know, would you want that plus the sign face? Or, you know, because they could have the logo color or the, you know, the business branding color, enter or exit on it, or a logo or anything else like that. So it was another option that occurred to me if people were concerned about the visual impact of those. But again, you know, there hasn't been a lot of demand on it, and you know, really a lot of businesses in town are in strip centers, and these don't necessarily apply to those. I mean, you can have it. A property owner could allow their anchor tenant to have, you know, their logo or branding colors on the sign, but this is not per business, it's per property. So if you're in a strip center or anything like that, it's you know, there seem to be you know, less tied to the businesses, so there seems to be less demand for them than at banks or businesses that kind of like to put that branding out by the street.
So just to begin, tonight, this is just for discussion. Are we voting on it?
And if there's one that you kind of prefer or one of those approaches, then, you know, let me know, and you know, when I start putting together an ordinance or a draft ordinance that would go, you know, for you all to look at, and then also you know, move on to the Planning Commission, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for input too, and ultimately passage by the board. You know, I'll incorporate the language that you'd like to see in it, along with any other fixes we identify. So if, you know, if you as a board have a sense of, you know, whether you think one per driveway or two is the way to go, any additional changes or anything, you know, that you can think of, you know, you can, you know, provide some direction tonight, and then I can take that and start putting it together in a more ordinance type form for you.
Okay. Well, I will, you know, from my perspective, I like the Amendment 2 option where you could have two signs, if we're
What?
going to do that.
I couldn't hear you.
The second one, you know, one that comes to mind is the car wash up here, Pure Magic. I mean, I know it's not perfectly, but they really do want you to come in on one side and come out on the other side, even though there is a little parking area over there. So that might be one that would benefit from. But personally, I think if they're allowed, it makes sense that they be on both sides of that entrance.
Yeah.
So you can have an enter and an exit. I realize they could put other things on there, but the intent obviously is to have an enter or an exit. So that's my initial thought, is that would be, if we're going to make an amendment, we should make it in that direction. So from there, other comments?
Yeah, I was originally on the committee that worked on the revision of our sign ordinance, and I was against the current language. I felt that we should allow two signs. And so I agree with you, Marty, that, that we should go with the second possible amendment there. I just think that's the right thing to do.
So, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I agree with both of them, but I use Horizon Bank all the time. And even though I use it and I know where it is, it's still easy. If you're coming down Kingston Pike, their sign for Horizon's pretty much in the front of the bank. And I forget which side street sometimes, you're supposed to turn over. So I personally like the size of their sign. It's very visual, you can see it. And I'm one of those people, if it didn't have where to enter, I'd probably end up going in the exit sign or something. So I think that visual reminder is very helpful
Okay.
in finding places. And I just personally like the color and the size of the First Horizon one.
Well, the size of that sign is compliant with this.
Yeah.
So the height and the square footage of that would be permitted under this language.
Okay.
So,
I wasn't here when we discussed this the last time, so this may be a very obvious question. Are we saying that when we approach the driveway, we want to make sure that we know where the entrance is and distinguish that from the exit? Okay.
well, there's,
That's my
there's been people that have asked about them and just decided not to do them. We've had a couple that just assumed they could put them up and did. And so, before we went down the road of enforcement actions and that sort of thing, we thought, is there a demand for this type of signage? And, should y'all consider it? I mean, I think when the ordinance was being put together, people didn't think it was that big of a deal because, we drive on the right-hand side of the road and you turn in. But, there are some instances where, traffic flow is an issue. Clearly, once we went back and read it, the way it was written per street and not per access. So on the one hand, it would allow property owner to have another sign anywhere along the frontage, which, they might want, but it's such a small sign that, it's really intended for that little branding thing or an enter exit, or, if somebody just wanted to, if it was a Starbucks and it was a freestanding Starbucks and they just wanted to have, their logo out there at the entranceway, they could, so.
I mean, Starbucks is a good example of them wanting you to go in, because normally, as
Yeah.
we would approach that off the side road, you'd want to go in the first entrance, right?
Now-
And they don't want you to do that for drive-through.
Now they wanted, I think they wanted to have one at the other driveway.
Yeah, I
As
think
well.
they did.
They did.
Yeah.
Or both.
Well, they were gonna have, really, I think they would both have been entrances, and they were gonna try to flow traffic
Yeah.
in, and, it's been so popular there, I think the way they run traffic now is really the only viable way, because if you had it all through that parking lot, it would be anarchy trying to get people in queue, but,
So when you say, I just got one more question, I'll move on, but when you say the entrance to McDonald's, you talking about the entrance off the side, we're talking about the McDonald's right over here?
Yeah.
The entrance to the side road or the entrance right off Kingston Pike?
the entrance right off
Right off
Kingston
Kingston.
Pike. but
Which has
not-
multiple businesses.
Yeah, well, not the cut off Kingston Pike, but then,
Oh.
you pull in off Kingston Pike, but then there's also the driveway, or the very wide, open driveway into McDonald's. You can
Make that
circle
hard
around by the
right
tire
turn off
store.
Kingston Pike,
you know.
Yes.
to the left end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
So-
where the entrance sign is?
Yeah.
Oh, I got you, okay, all right.
Yeah, they got one on
Okay.
each corner there, one, enter and exit. They don't have any around the side, by the tire store, on that back entrance.
With this language, would they allow them to have signs on the backside?
They would, yeah.
An example of a confusion that could use a sign like that is Dunkin' Donuts. Because I take my dog there to Fabulous Fido and get her, and I usually will go into Dunkin' Donuts. Well, I haven't gone there in a long time, so I wasn't sure how you went in. But I'm coming from that side road that runs up along the side of it. So I'm immediately turning left off that road behind Cracker Barrel to go into Dunkin' Donuts. So what I discovered is that when I do that, I can't get in the lane to go through the drive-through. So I have to go to the back, make a U-turn, and come around and get in that.
Yeah. Now,
Line.
now, this probably wouldn't solve that problem, because again, there's multiple businesses in there, so unless the
Okay.
business owner
So
set
it
it up
wouldn't
to where
matter.
only Dunkin', and now that would be totally up to the shop,
Yeah.
the shopping center owner, if they want to designate, their, a lead tenant or one of their tenants that might have a greater need for that type
Yeah.
of, they can, most certainly do that.
I'm kind of in agreement with everybody else just about the second one, allowing two for either side. I think it just makes more sense, just from the ones that that have been requested. I think they do make sense, and to allow it to fall in to the wording. I mean, about the color of the base of it, I think it's a good question. However, I think making it, compatible, like Jeannie said, that that's the sign for that bank because it's logoed. It may stand out more with the amount of traffic and the speed on the roads. It may help actually identify which business it's for, if it can be compatible with the building rather than all of them looking the same.
Sure, okay. Well, it sounds like,
I do have a question here. Where's the additional item for discussion? We're talking about the color and the poles and so forth. It's the same size sign, right?
yeah,
So we're talking 2 square feet,
well, I'm not talking about the sign face.
but the sign itself, okay, sign face is 2 square feet.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So what's the height?
Um,
Somewhere I read in here, what's the
30
height?
inches.
30 inches.
Yep.
So 2.5 feet. So if you've got a base under that.
Yeah.
I'm confused
Well,
about
well,
this pole thing that you're
well,
talking
well,
about. What
the
other
base-
supports are you gonna have other than the base? That's what's confusing me.
Well, the base, I think Mark used the same language, and I might clarify that it's not like a brick base, that we require, because obviously we're not going to require a 2-foot, high, brick base. I think it's the pole, or whatever it's going to be mounted on. Sometimes they're on, they're mounted in like a concrete pedestal, and then they're up, something like that. But most of the time, it's just a pole in the ground that,
Okay,
it
I'm with
sits
you.
on. So,
So-
um,
Well, in that case, I
Yeah.
can see it being black,
but,
matted black.
but we
or
have
whatever.
some that have double poles, one on
Mhm.
each end, and, I just wanted to know whether you want.
So that would be the base. You don't have to have a base and poles. I mean, it would be, there wouldn't be
Yeah,
enough.
I think
That
that's
makes sense.
reasonable. I'll work on that language a little bit when when I put it in ordinance form, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. If there was gonna be a base or like a larger structure, I think it needs to be architecturally compatible. Like if, say they decided to mount it on a brick column or something like that, we would want that to be compatible with what else was
I think that
there,
needs to be
but,
clarified.
if it's just gonna be on a mounting pole, then, that's not really a big deal.
Should it also include language then if we're kind of separating the pole from the base? So
Right.
we're basically saying it's the same thing, but should we also specify you can't have a base that's 10 inches or 12 inches and then,
Yeah.
the pole on top of that? Because we don't want people,
Well,
the
it
whole
does say
sign
30
with the
inches in
base and the
overall
poles
height.
should be,
It says
30.
30 inches in overall height,
Yeah.
and then it would go back to how we measure height in the ordinance, which would be
which is from the
grade.
ground. Yeah.
But, I can work on I'll put a note to myself to work on clarifying that a bit.
A 2 square foot sign is a 1 by 2, 1 foot by 2 foot. So now you got 1 foot off the 30 inches, so the highest that you could go with a base and any other structure is 18 inches. I don't see why you would have a base and poles. So it's either a
Well-
base or poles, I would think. And if it's poles, if it's a base
Yeah.
of whatever, it
Yeah,
should
but the
be
total height of the sign
total height of the,
is 30 inches,
30
so it's
inches.
just under 3 feet.
yes, and I'm saying if the sign face itself is a foot high, that leaves only 18 inches
Yeah, yeah.
underneath it for any
Yeah.
type of base structure.
Yeah,
whether
it's
it be
not
a-
much,
yeah.
it's not much. I think, the language of, and the base got carried over from a lot of other language in the ordinance where we're talking about various types of ground signs that do have to have a more significant base under them.
Well, I like the idea of architecturally compatible or black.
I would think you need to actually specify for uniformity, the pole, that it would be black,
Yeah.
a black pole. Otherwise, I can see somebody coming along with a stack of bricks, and it just would look like crap. But, I think you would need to specify the color of the pole that it would be mounted on, or a pole. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, someone could use something that was more decorative, though. I mean, you wouldn't want to necessarily, someone could have, instead of a pole, they could have, some sort of structure, maybe with them hanging out there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that, or my suggestion to think about there was, do you want, if someone's putting a structure up, any type of structure, whether it be a column or something more ornate, it needs to be, the structure that's holding the sign needs to be architecturally compatible with the building. But then, I was also just thinking about color and whether or not, you're happy or think it's fine that, if various businesses want to have them on colored poles to go along with the colored sign face, if they chose to do that, or whether you wanted to be a little bit more restrictive and say, that the mounting, the mounting hardware, the structure needed to be flat black or something like that. And
I think you need to zero in specifically on the pole. I think with the sign itself, they can use color or whatever they want to do. But I think my recommendation would be to just make it a uniform pole, black pole or something that,
It's almost like you want to say if you choose to mount it on an exposed pole, then it's going to be the black or whatever.
Poles
But
are
if you
poles or-
choose to use a more decorative base, then it would be, needs to be compatible with the
Yeah.
building or the other ground-mounted sign, something
And we
like
could do
that.
something like that. I mean, it just, I don't know how big of a problem colored poles are gonna be. I just, it was something I thought about. Like I said, there's not a lot of these in town. I think, I can't remember, I meant to drive past and I forgot to look at the ones there at New Horizon. The poles there, the mounting structure might be the same color as the sign face, y'all might want to look at that between now and the next meeting. I can work on the language anyway, and then, you could always approve it subject to a change one way or the other,
It could also be an encased sign. It could be a rectangle like this, right? And the top half of the rectangle is the sign, logo, enter, and then the bottom is the same material that's a different color.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an exposed pole. It probably is
true.
not going to be that.
That's true.
It's
It
probably
could-
going to be something.
Yeah, although if, depending on how it was made, we would start measuring the whole frame of the sign.
Yes.
So they would get over 2 square feet really quickly. And, if they tried to put just like a giant rectangle and just had the message at the top, we'd probably count the whole rectangle and not. and
So
not
you
be
said,
part of
you're
the
saying
structure.
that you would count the total encasement,
We would.
ground and
Yeah,
30 inches, you're going to count all that
we probably would.
If it was solid.
if it was
Right,
solid.
if it was a
Yeah,
solid.
yeah.
But I think, so like the ones
If
at
they were trying
McDonald's.
to get around, like if the whole thing was, some businesses logo color, or.
Well, I was saying, let's say Dunkin' Donuts, top half 1x2 logo, bottom half orange.
Yeah, we would count the whole thing at that point, probably.
Okay, gotcha.
Like McDonald's has two, it's almost like it's full like fiberglass or whatever the thing is, but they're square, there's a space in the middle of the two legs, but it looks like it pretty much goes up into the sign. It's all dark gray or black or whatever and has the words at the top. But you could tell, they're not just poles, but I'm sure they're covered poles into the ground. But it looks like the sign face just over, it just has two legs, basically.
Yeah.
compatible with what's on the building now. So it's just a darker color.
You know, but if you could imagine that sign, you know, those are just sort of a dark brown or black type color, you know. If you could imagine those in red or yellow, the whole thing, you know, or any type of sign like that, you know, so that, you know, there's a difference between the signage, although we do start measuring it, you know, when it becomes clear that there's more sign there, you know, like Randy's saying, if it, you know, was a whole panel like that, we'd probably consider the whole thing advertising and count the whole thing as a sign, and they'd be over 2 square feet, as opposed to a sign face that could be logo, it could be branding color, it could be anything, whether it says enter, exit, or anything on it, mounted to a pole or mounted on another structure that's clearly not part of the advertising.
I think your words architecturally compatible cover you.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Because I think this sort of thing comes back before the board anyway, right?
When I first read that second part, I thought you must have had something come up where you had an issue in the town, but you're just looking ahead?
Yeah,
and
I'm
there's
just looking
nothing to
ahead, I
plan?
just was like, you know, okay, if over time we ended up having, you know, numerous signs running up and down Kingston Pike at every driveway cut, and, you know, it was a kaleidoscope of color poles. Now, you know, as it is, you could have signs, you know, all different sign face colors, but, you know, how much more did you potentially want? So it just occurred to me while I was kind of thinking and sort of trying to visualize it. So just leave it with architecturally compatible or deal with the colors? Or
I think I would go with architecturally compatible.
okay.
Any other conversation about the ordinance amendment potential? Is there anything else that we need to discuss tonight, Bart?
No, that's it. I'll be working on that, putting it in ordinance form, and like I said, you know, there'll probably be some other, you know, clarifications to the ordinance we'll put in to just try to clean things up. So I'll try to get those to you in advance of whenever I'm gonna ask you to make a recommendation on them, so you can read
All
them
right.
over in detail.
All right, well, with that, we will adjourn. See you guys next month.